Unit 10 test review. Okay, so on simplifying the radicals, you have to really make sure that you factor and cancel out. So that's really the only two things you need to do. Factor, cancel out. So I'm going to factor this up here. So what two numbers multiply to get 18 and combine to get negative 11? That is x minus 9 and x minus 2. And then on the bottom, what two numbers multiply to get negative 8 and combine to get 2? That is going to be x plus 4 and x minus 2. So I did the factoring, and now I just cancel out. So your final answer would be x minus 9 over x plus 4. Okay, on number 3, again, I'm going to factor. And I'm going to cancel out. So what two numbers multiply to get 12 and add to get 8? So I'm seeing x plus 6 and x plus 2. And then on the bottom, what two numbers will multiply to get negative 18 and combine to get 3? That's going to give me x plus 6 and x minus 3. So again, there's one on the top, one on the bottom. So my final simplified answer is x plus 2 over x minus 3. Alright, so now we're going to perform the indicated operation and simplify. So here you can tell that you're subtracting. So what you'd want to do first is you need to find the common denominator. So that's the first thing you want to do. Common denominator. So I can see that this one has x plus 1, this one has x plus 2. So this one still needs an x plus 1. And whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So x plus 1. And then this needs an x plus 2, so I'm also going to multiply this by x plus 2. And again, whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So x plus 2. Alright, so now that's going to be my common denominator. It's going to be this x plus 2, x plus 1. So I'm actually just going to kind of hold on to that for a minute, and I'm only going to do the numerator. So if I write out the numerator, this is what I have so far. Don't forget the subtraction sign. And then x plus 1. So the main thing you need to do here is make sure you do not forget to distribute the negative. So it gets distributed to the x and the 1. So here I'm just going to do my distributing. So I've got 4x plus 8 minus 2x minus 2. And that gives me 2x plus 6 over x plus 2, x plus 1. Okay, so what I'm now noticing is that I can actually factor out a 2 here. So I'm going to factor out a 2. So if I factor out that 2 there, that leaves me with x plus 3 on the inside. And then here I would have x plus 2 and then x plus 1. And there's nothing for me to cancel out here, so that would be my final answer. Okay, so adding is the exact same thing. You still have to have that common denominator. So this one has n plus 1, so this one also needs n plus 1. And again, whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. Now, this one needs n minus 7. And again, whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. Okay, so on this one here, I'm just going to write out the numerator again. So I have 7n times n minus 7 plus 8, and then n plus 1. So I'm going to distribute. Here I'm just distributing a positive. So I have 7n squared minus 49n plus 8n plus 8. Okay, so I'm just going to combine everything. So now I have 7n squared. I'm going to combine these n's here. And that gives me, what is that? Negative minus 41. N plus 8. And then all of that will just be over n minus 7. N plus 1. Okay, so this one's a little bit more basic on number 6. On number 6, again, you're looking for a common denominator. So remember, you actually have 2 b's here. So this one would need one more b to kind of catch up with it. So I'm going to multiply this by b, and again, whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. Alright, so now what I really have here is I have 3 over b squared plus b over b squared. But the 3 and the b can't be combined, so my final answer would just be 3 plus b over b squared. So the most important thing about these is when you're doing the subtraction, really make sure you distribute that negative. That's where the most common mistakes are going to happen. Okay, so that should you should be able to do the other ones on your own now. Okay, so let's take a look down here. So on these, we're actually going to start multiplying and dividing. Now, with the multiplying, you really want to make sure you just factor, factor, factor. So with the multiplying, you want to factor and cancel out. It's almost just like the simplifying. Okay, so on this one, I can't do anything with the p minus 9. But I do notice that I can factor out p squared plus 6p minus 27. So what two numbers multiply to get negative 27 and add to get 6? That's going to be x plus 9, or p. I should probably change that. Let me do that. Okay, and then p minus 3, all over p plus 9. So again, I'm looking to see what I can cancel on the top and the bottom. So looking at this, I can cancel that and that. So the only thing I have left on top is p minus 3, and then on the bottom, p minus 9. Now, don't get tempted to simplify this. These are all together, and they have to stay together. So do not simplify. Okay, so on this one, you need to remember back in probably junior high or intermediate, the keep, change, flip. So what I notice is I'm going to keep this one, and there's nothing I can factor there. I'm going to change the division to multiplying, and then I'm going to flip. Now, what I notice here, though, is I can actually factor out an 8 here. So I'm going to factor out an 8, and when I do that, that leaves me with n minus 6. And then I'm going to put that on the bottom because I flipped them. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start finding things to cancel out. So on this one, I can see top, bottom, so that cancels out. Again, top, bottom, that cancels out, and the only thing I'm left with is 8. Okay, so on this one, again, you're just factoring, and then you're just going to cross out. Just notice you can cross out or factor out a 7 there, and that gives you p plus 2 on the inside. And then by then you should kind of see what you can cross out and what you can't. All right, on the back, I'm going to do number 14 with you. Okay, so the main thing to remember on number 14, y'all, is that this begins with over 1, okay? So I'm still going to do the keep, change, flip. Okay, so on this one, with keep, change, flip, I see that this is my special pattern. So the square root of 49 is 7, so I'm going to have an x minus 7, x plus 7, that's that special pattern, over x plus 2. And then I'm going to change that to multiplying, and then I'm going to flip. So now the 1's on top, and the x minus 7 is on the bottom. Okay, so I'm just going to start canceling things out. I have something on the top, something on the bottom, and so what my answer is what's left. So what's left is x plus 7 over x plus 2. So again, the main thing when canceling out, y'all, is make sure that it's on the top and bottom. So pretend that this was also an x minus 7. You cannot cross those out. It has to be on the top and the bottom. Not top, top, not bottom, bottom, top, bottom. Okay, on number 17, this is that clearing the denominator. So you have to really make sure you have a common denominator. Now, I'm going to double check this to see if those are actually the factors. So what two numbers will multiply to get positive 12 and combine to get negative 8? So I'm seeing it's x minus 2 and x minus 6. Well, that's good. That's the same thing I have here. Now, they are using k's. I accidentally use x because I'm more used to doing that. All right, so here I can tell that this needs a k minus 2. And whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top, so k minus 2. And then this needs a be multiplied by k minus 6. And again, whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So what I'm actually going to do here is, once I find that common denominator, I really don't need this denominator anymore. So as soon as you find that common denominator, I'm just going to cross all that out, because as long as whatever I did to the bottom, I did to the top, I'm good to go. So right now, I'm only going to write out the numerator, the top part. So 4 equals, k times k minus 6 plus 1 k minus 2. So distribute, distribute. All right, so now what I have is I have 4 equals k squared minus 6k plus 1k minus 2. Now, this is a quadratic. So because this is a quadratic, it has to equal 0 in order to solve. So if you go back and remember, all the quadratic's answers are on the x-axis, and remember, those were called your zeros because that is where y equals 0. So I'm going to make this equal to 0 now, and then I'm going to combine everything. So I'm going to finish my problem over here so I have more space. Okay, so now what I have is I have 0 equals k squared. I'm going to combine all my k's. That gives me negative 5k, and then negative 6. Okay, so now I've got to factor it. Factor. Make sure I'm using the k instead of the x. All right, so again, what two numbers will multiply to get negative 6 and combine to get negative 5? Now, you may be really tempted to use 2 and 3 because 2 plus 3 is 5, and you can see the 2 times 3 is 6. But this is going to be a tricky one. So it's actually going to be a 6 and a 1. I have more negatives, so minus and plus. Okay, so for this one, again, it has to equal 0, so k will be negative 1, and k will be 6. Now, we need to talk about something. If you come back up here, you need to remember about those extraneous solutions. So you can't divide by 0. So before you really kind of say, oh yeah, those are my answers, you need to come back here and see what k can't be. So for this problem, I can tell that k cannot be 2, because 2 minus 2 is 0, so it can't be 2. And I also notice it can't be 6, because 6 minus 6 is 0. And again, you can't divide by 0. So my answers that it can't be are 2 and 6. Well, uh-oh, I got a 6. So this would actually be your extraneous solution, okay? So this would actually be your only real answer. Okay, so let's look at number 20. So on number 20, this is that cross multiplying. Now, it's really easy to get these two concepts confused, but if you'll notice, when you're doing the cross multiplying, you only have one thing here and one thing here. One thing here, one thing here. But when you're doing these problems, notice they'll have two things, 2 plus something, and then just the one thing. Blank minus something, then the one thing. So they have 2 things, or 3, and then 1. But when you're cross multiplying, you only have one thing and one thing. Okay, so I'm going to cross multiply. Boom, boom. So that gives me 8 times x minus 1 equals 2 times 3x minus 2. And again, y'all, it really doesn't matter if you put this first or this second, as long as they're equal to each other. All right, so now I'm going to start distributing. Distribute. Okay, that gives me, what, 8x minus 8 equals 6x minus 4. Now, I just want to get my variables to one side and my constants to the other. So I'm going to subtract this over here. That gives me 2x. And then I'm going to add this over here. And that gives me equals 4. So then I'm going to divide by 2, x just equals 2. Okay, so now this one can be a little bit more complicated. So let's take a look at number 21. So again, I'm going to cross multiply. So I'll do x minus 3, x plus 2 on this side, and x and x plus 5 on this side. Okay, so here I'm going to have to FOIL. So multiply. Now I can tell what the answer already is, so I'm going to write it out. I got x squared. I have a negative 3 and a positive 2. That means I'm going to have a negative x. And then I'm going to multiply negative 3 times 2, and that gives me negative 6. Okay, and then I'm going to distribute this. Boom, boom. X squared plus 5. Okay, so now I'm just going to start trying to move everything so I can isolate just the x. Now, because the x squareds are on both sides, they're going to actually end up canceling out. So I'm going to cancel those out right away because that doesn't look as familiar to us. Okay, so now what I have is I have negative x minus 6 equals 5. Then I'm going to add 6. I'm going to do it over here. That gives me negative x equals 11, but there aren't any negative letters in the alphabet, so I need to make that a positive x. So divide by 1, divide by -1, so x equals -11. Okay, so again, with a lot of these, even on these, be careful because you could end up getting a quadratic and you have to factor like we did up here. So sometimes it'll come out real nice where it's just an x, but then sometimes you do need to understand that if it's k squared and you can't cancel out, you're going to have to factor. Alright, so let's take a look at the word problems. Now, I am not going to solve these with that chart, okay? And on number 24, we canceled that one out. It may be kind of hard for you to see, but this is all about upstream, downstream. Let me see if I can get the camera a little closer so you can see it. So you won't be tested over one like that. And then actually number 23 is on the notes. It's the exact same one. Now, the way I'm going to do it is I'm not going to use that table, all right? Okay, so let's take a look here. Let me fix the camera. I'm sure there's a more technological way to do that, but I'm just going to lift it up. Okay, so I'm only going to do 25 and 26. So how I'm going to solve these is I'm going to look at these as time together over time alone. Okay, so it says Erica can paint her room in 5 hours. Well, that's her alone time. 5 hours. That's how long it takes Erica. If she has her friend Rachel help her, they can paint the room together in 3 hours. So Erica and Rachel. How long would it take for Rachel to paint the room alone? Okay, so the information I do know is I know how much time it's going to take them together. Okay, so that can be my numerator. So 3, 3. Then the time alone, well, I only know Erica's. And I don't know Rachel's because that's what I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so that's my equation. 3 over 5 plus 3 over x equals 1. Now, we're going to combine two concepts here. The adding and subtracting rational expressions, and then also clearing the denominator. So I have to have a common denominator in order to do both of those. So the common denominator is actually going to be 5x. So on this one, I need to make sure that I multiply the 5 by x. Whatever I do on the bottom, I do to the top. Here I need to multiply this by 5. And again, whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. Okay, so I'm going to do it over here. So what I now have is I have 3x over 5x plus 15 over 5x. And remember, in order to clear the denominator, everything has to have 5x. Now, this still has to equal 1. So the way you're going to do that is if you have the same thing on the top and the bottom. 5x divided by 5x is still 1. All right, so this is the fun part. I'm going to get rid of all this complicated stuff down here. And then really the only thing I'm solving is 3x plus 15 equals 5x. So I'm going to subtract the 3x. That gives me 15 equals 2x. And then if I divide by the 2, x will equal 7.5. All right, so let's take a look here. It takes Jill 3 hours, so Jill 3 hours to make sandwiches for a charity organization. Allie starts 1 hour later, and if she were working alone, it would take her 4 hours. Now, we're going to kind of ignore this 1 hour later. This could get complicated, but we're just going to look at this as a more basic one. 4 hours to make sandwiches needed. How long will it take both of them, so how long for both of them working together to complete the job? So again, we're still going to use time together over time alone. I've got Jill, and I've got Allie. Now, Jill takes 3 hours working alone. Allie started, and it took her 4 hours. And because I don't know how long it's going to take both of them to work together, I'm going to put an X on top, because I don't know yet. And again, they're doing one job. All of these will equal 1, all of them. Okay, so my common denominator can be 12. So I'm going to multiply this by 4. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. I'm going to multiply this by 3. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. Okay, so what I now have is I have 4x over 12 plus 3x over 12. And again, in order to clear the denominator, they all have to be 12. So this will also be 12 because 12 divided by 12 is 1. All right, so again, let's get rid of all that confusing stuff. Boom. So the only thing I'm really solving here is 4x plus 3x equals 12. That gives me 7x equals 12. Divide by 7. Divide by 7. And let me grab a calculator. Our little nifty baby calculators. And 12 divided by 7 is 1.71. I'll just call it that. So 1.71 hours. Okay, and again, your equation could be 4x over 12 plus 3x over 12 can equal 1. All right, I hope that helped you. The full answer key for this is on the website, so make sure that you go check these and you know how to do these. Again, you don't need to worry about doing this one. This problem here is on the notes if you need extra help. And again, remember the difference. When you're cross multiplying, it's just cross cross. Okay, I hope that helped you.